It buried them instead beneath layers of gold dust, beneath winds that whispered half-truths, beneath a sky so wide it made even memories feel small. And Fazza had always believed she was one of those secrets unwritten, unseen, untouched. Until the night her shadow spoke. It began in silence, as most impossible things do. Fazza stood alone on the terrace of a palace that glittered like a mirage against the endless dunes. The city behind her pulsed with distant lights flickering like constellations fallen to earth, but none of it reached her. Not really. She had everything people dreamed of, and yet something inside her remained unclaimed, like a page waiting for a story that refused to be written. The wind brushed past her, warm and restless, carrying grains of sand that shimmered under the moonlight. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around her like a fragile promise. That was when she noticed it. Her shadow wasn't still. At first, she thought it was just the flicker of light, the way the lantern behind her trembled slightly in the wind. But when she opened her eyes again, her breath caught. The shadow had moved. Not shifted. Not stretched. Moved. It stood a step away from her. Fazza turned slowly, her heartbeat tightening into something sharp and uncertain. The terrace was empty. No one was there. And yet, when she looked back down, the shadow no longer matched her. It faced her. A silence fell heavy, unnatural, almost aware of itself. And then, it spoke. "You've been waiting for me." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It existed directly inside the moment, as if it had always belonged there. Fazza stepped back, her breath unsteady. "This isn't real." The shadow tilted its head, or at least, it gave the illusion of doing so. Its edges flickered like liquid darkness, unstable but deliberate. "Reality," it said softly, "is just the story you've agreed to believe." Her throat tightened. "Shadows don't talk." "Neither do hearts," it replied, "until they break enough to learn how." Something in those words struck deeper than fear. Fazza swallowed, forcing herself to stand still. "What are you?" The shadow hesitated, as if the answer mattered. "I am the part of you that you buried," it said. "The voice you silenced. The truth you refused to see." The wind grew stronger, swirling around them, pulling at her hair, her thoughts, her certainty. "No," Fazza whispered. "I would know." "You did know," the shadow replied. "You just chose to forget." And suddenly, memories fragmented, blurred, half lost began to surface. A locked door. A name she couldn't fully recall. A moment where something inside her had shattered, and instead of facing it, she had sealed it away. Fazza pressed her fingers against her temples. "Stop." But the shadow didn't. "You think your life began where your memories start," it continued, its voice calm, almost gentle. "But there is a before, Fazza, a truth that exists beyond what you allowed yourself to remember. Her pulse pounded. Why now? The shadow stepped closer, its form stretching unnaturally across the marble floor, reaching toward her like a reflection breaking free. Because you're ready to hear it? I'm not, she said immediately. You are, it insisted. Or I wouldn't be here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night seemed to hold its breath. And then Fazza asked the question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. What truth? The shadow didn't respond right away. Instead, it turned slowly toward the vast desert beyond the palace walls. The dunes shimmered under the moonlight, endless and silent, hiding more than they revealed. That the life you're living, it said quietly, was never meant to be yours. The words didn't feel like a revelation. They felt like recognition. A crack formed somewhere deep inside her, a realization she couldn't yet explain but couldn't ignore either. Fazza shook her head, stepping back again. You're lying. Am I? The shadow asked. Its form shifted again, stretching, reshaping, and for a brief, terrifying second, it looked like her. Not just her outline. Her. The same posture. The same stillness. The same unspoken weight behind the eyes. I remember what you forgot, it said. I carry what you left behind. Fazza's voice dropped to a whisper. Why would I forget something like that? The shadow's answer came softly. To survive it. The wind stilled. Everything stilled. And in that moment, Fazza realized something that changed everything. She wasn't afraid of the shadow. She was afraid it might be telling the truth. Far below, the city lights flickered again, distant and unaware. The world continued as it always had. But on that terrace, beneath a silent sky, something had shifted. A story had begun. And it wasn't the one Fazza thought she was living. The shadow turned back toward her, its presence now steady, certain. This is only the beginning, it said. Fazza didn't reply. Because deep down, she already knew. Nothing in her life would ever be silent again. The night did not end. It stretched. It deepened. It watched. Fazza did not sleep after that moment on the terrace. Sleep belonged to those who carried lighter truths. She, now, carried something else, something unfinished, something waiting. The shadow did not disappear. It followed. Not behind her, not beneath her, but with her. A quiet presence, lingering at the edge of her awareness like a second heartbeat she had only just begun to hear. By dawn, the palace felt different. Too large. Too hollow. Every corridor echoed with something unspoken. Every mirror seemed to hesitate before reflecting her face, as if unsure which version of her it should reveal. And the shadow, it was still there. You said my life wasn't mine, Fazza whispered, standing before a tall window where the desert met the rising sun. Then whose is it? The shadow stretched along the floor beside her, darker than it should have been in the morning light. It was borrowed, it replied. Given to you the day you chose to forget. Fazza's reflection stared back at her, calm on the surface, fractured underneath. I don't remember choosing anything. You don't remember, the shadow said, because remembering would have destroyed you. A pause. Then. Or so you believed. Those words settled into her like a quiet challenge. Fazza turned away from the window. Then show me. Silence followed. Not empty silence, but the kind that listens. You're asking for the truth, the shadow said slowly. Not all truths are meant to be seen again. I don't care. You will. I already do, she replied, her voice stronger now. Whatever I forgot, it's still controlling me. I can feel it. The shadow didn't argue this time. Instead, it moved, pulling away from her, stretching unnaturally across the floor, toward the far end of the room where an old door stood. A door Fazza had never opened. Not once. She had passed it 1,000 times, never questioning why it remained closed. Until now. What's in there? She asked quietly. The shadow paused at the edge of the door. You. The word felt heavier than it should have. Fazza hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she walked forward. Each step felt slower than the last, as if the air itself resisted her. As if something inside her knew what waited beyond that door, and wasn't ready to face it. Her hand reached the handle. Cold. Unfamiliar. Final. Once you open it, the shadow said behind her, there is no forgetting again. Fazza closed her eyes briefly. Then she turned the handle. The door opened without a sound. Inside, there was no room. No furniture. No walls. Only darkness. Not empty darkness, but something deeper, something alive, something that seemed to breathe with its own quiet rhythm. Fazza stepped inside. And the world disappeared. At first, there was nothing. No sound. No light. No sense of time. Then. A memory. Not gentle. Not distant. Sharp. Immediate. She was running. The desert stretched endlessly before her, but this time it was not silent. The wind roared. The sky burned with a storm that didn't belong to nature. Behind her. Footsteps. Voices. Shouting her name. Not with love. With urgency. With fear. Fazza. She turned. And saw them. Figures she didn't fully recognize but somehow knew. Their faces blurred, but their emotions didn't. Panic. Desperation. Betrayal. And in the center of it all. Him. A man standing still while everything else moved. Watching her. Not chasing. Not calling. Just watching. Why did you run? The shadow's voice echoed through the memory. Fazza tried to speak, but the answer caught in her throat. The memory shifted. Now she stood still, facing him. The storm quieted, but the silence that replaced it was worse. You made a choice, the shadow said. I don't remember. You do. And suddenly, she did. The truth didn't return slowly. It broke through her. She hadn't been running from them. She had been running from herself. From what she had done. From the moment she realized that the life she was living, the identity she carried, the world she belonged to had been built on something she could no longer accept. I left, she whispered. No, the shadow corrected. You erased. Fazza's breath trembled. I couldn't live with it. So you chose not to remember it, the shadow said. You abandoned your truth, and created a quieter version of yourself. The memory shifted again. She saw herself standing in this same darkness, long ago. Speaking words she had forgotten. I don't want to be her anymore. And then, silence. Everything collapsed. The darkness shattered. Fazza fell to her knees. Back in the room. Back in the present. The door behind her stood open, but the darkness inside it had vanished. It was just a room now. Empty. Ordinary. Like nothing had ever happened. But everything had. Her breathing was uneven. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with recognition. I chose this, she said softly. The shadow.